This is for the choir.
Thanks to John, took a moment of silence to open our hearts. Comfortable, warm silence. But you know what? I got through this. Come on, folks, stay with me. When I put this together, it was because of the Spirit. God's Spirit gave it to me, and I'm going to try to give it to you. So open your hearts. Let that Spirit in. Open your hearts. Let that Spirit flow over all of our walkers today. And let's be thankful for the grace of God. Amen. All right. Now that we're all awake, I am going through what we all went through. Normally we have our books filled, okay? So we just got to find a way to get through. But I have something to admit to you. I do not have an embedded theology. An embedded theology is shaped by family, worship, church, tradition, and personal experiences rather than formal study. I even had a theology professor that quipped one time about not sitting in a given seat because it's where Mrs. Johnson sat. And she was a longtime member. And we all can feel that. If you walk into a new church, where do we sit? In the back. Because we don't want to sit in anybody's seat. When I was a child, I attended All Souls Episcopal Church in Harlem. Mom was fairly faithful, and we attended regularly. But my big day came when Mom said I could travel to church on my own. And I lived in the Bronx, so this was a big thing. So on Sunday morning, I took the number 6 train by myself and went to church. And unlike a lot of you, I didn't attend Sunday school. Actually, I'm not even sure that they had one. But it's important that I say this because when it was time to celebrate Easter, I knew it was an important day. It was a day to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. But to me, it was only important because it was the culmination of a week of preparation of my chance to become an altar boy. My brother, who was 6 years older than I, was an altar boy, and I looked up. Now, you go, what is the significance of this story? And you may ask. I was told that I was too young to be an altar boy, which confused me because I couldn't understand what my age had to do with worshiping God. Consequently, I left the church, never getting an understanding of God, Easter, and who Jesus was. That's a nice story. But you may ask, what does it do with Easter and Jesus? Well, a young lady friend of mine once told me, "Tranquilo, Papa, it's coming." Believe it or not, I only started to get a feel for who Jesus was during the civil rights movement. It sounds strange. But Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King talked about his strength for nonviolence, which came from the teachings of Jesus. But, as with anything in life, knowledge comes from being taught. And may I say, exposure to information. My education started, actually, when I came back to church. And this beloved community is the one I return to after 48 years away. I knew about God and Jesus, but I didn't know Jesus until I listened to sermons, attended Bible study, and I also attended classes at New York Theological Seminary, which furthered my understanding of the way, the Jesus way. The Jesus way refers to a lifestyle of radical discipleship modeled after Jesus, focusing on love. And as John beautifully spoke about in his reading of the gospel, it was about that love. You're no longer a servant, you're my equal, and we love. Jesus focusing on love and humility, forgiveness and grace, rather than self-interest or worldly power. You did not choose me, but I chose you. And I appointed you to go bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another and bear fruit of love. Beautiful, beautiful words. So how, I ask, did this man who performed 31 miracles, healing and feeding thousands, this Prince of Peace, who became an enemy of Caiaphas, the high priest of Jerusalem, and subsequently was arrested, convicted, and turned over to Pilate for execution. Not just execution, not just like a hanging or something, but crucifixion, which was used for the highest crime against the state. So who was this loving Jesus? Is there another side? In his book, Binding the Strong Man, who Reverend Vicki Flippin gave to me at this church, because she said that book guided her in her ways of advocacy. But in Binding the Strong Man, a political reading of the Gospel according to Mark, Ched Myers states, and I quote, this is a long one, let me take a deep breath. Mark was written as a manifesto for radical Christian discipleship, and I believe remains one today. In contrast to other writings of his time, it's a story about and for the poor and the common folk. Its narrative strategy is clearly subversive of the local status quo of Roman Palestine. So Mark's Jesus, through symbolic action, word, and deed, systematically challenges the dominant order with its assumptions about power and piety, sacred space, and social class. Let that sink in for a second. Jesus wasn't all that love, 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 kumbaya. Okay? He was a force to be reckoned with. This Jesus forges a model of new social possibilities in which the socially disenfranchised are welcome to the table. Don't we do that with communion? In this church, no matter who you are, you're welcome to the table. And Jew and Gentile struggle to overcome the powerful ideologies of enmity between them. Jesus' actions provoke political opposition because they challenge the social codes, sites, and groups which ordered life and meaning in Palestinian Judaism during the Second Temple period. And according to Myers, when Jesus was baptized, and we all know that story, at least the one we read in the Bible, but sometimes don't take a good look at. He rises from Jordan's water to a vision of the heavens, torn apart by a mysterious voice. He is then driven into the wilderness for a confrontation with Satan and the angels. And I wonder, is this his training on how to deal with powers of the time? Those who represented evil, symbolically Satan. See, Jesus confronted the oppression of people both overtly and discreetly. Overtly, he publicly corrected the false teachers of the scribes and the Pharisees. Publicly, our sweet, beautiful, loving, kumbaya Jesus corrected the false teachings of the scribes and the Pharisees by teaching his disciples to be on constant guard against it. He corrected their misinterpretations by appealing to his own authority. Remember what we read. He repeatedly said, "You have heard it was said, but I say to you." Jesus directly confronted false teachers in the church. On one occasion, he came right out and said, "You're wrong, not knowing the scriptures or the power of God." See, Jesus was not afraid to tell people in the most confrontational way, "You're wrong." Jesus often exposed the true nature of the wickedness of false teachers by using animal names, metaphorically, of course, but he would describe them. He called the Pharisees the offsprings of serpents. Herod, I remember that part, for those who came to the pageant. Herod of fox, false teachers wolves, and those who refuse to reform to Gentiles dogs. And this is one of my favorites. A few years ago in a sermon, I said that there was Jesus and his disciples compared to Yeshua and his crew. Mark 11:15-18 from the Message. They arrived at Jerusalem. Immediately on entering the temple, Jesus started throwing out everyone who had set up shop there, buying and selling. He kicked over the tables of the bankers and the stalls of the pigeons, saying that you've turned it into a hangout for thieves. Well, what angered Yeshua was the exploitation of the poor. Again, the exploitation of the poor and the desecration of the temple in Jerusalem. And after that whole act, I can hear Peter turn to Yeshua and go, "Man, that was gangster." There was also less direct confrontational ways. And this came through miracles. And we all know the miracles as something beautiful. But some of his miracles actually challenged religious law. In Matthew 12:9-14, Jesus cures a man in a synagogue on the Sabbath. And we know from our readings how tightly and strongly the Sabbath was held. Okay? But to the powers that be, it was forbidden unless a life was in imminent danger. In Mark 2:1-12, Jesus forgave a man's sin, a move deemed blasphemy by the teachers of the law, who believed only God could forgive sins. Cleaning the leper, that we all know. If there's any miracle that we all know, it's the cleaning of the lepers. But in Matthew 8:1, by touching a leper, Jesus violated ceremonial laws of purification from Leviticus 13, which required separation and avoid ritual defilement. There's other miracles that he dealt with, which were against social norms, such as exorcism. Say that fast on a Sunday morning. Exorcism okay, and feeding of the 5,000. And these were kind of in contradiction to the local societal expectations. But I'm going to ask everybody, and this is a call and response now, what was Jesus' greatest provocation? That provoked the powers that be. Good. Anybody else? Go ahead, dear. Something that made you mad. Like if I stuck you in your eye, that's provoking you to punch me in my mouth. Okay? Turning the tables. Good. Especially in this society, okay? I can see, never mind, we won't get into it, that's another sermon. Turn the other cheek, that's kind of a sign of submission, I would think, that would be like a good thing. Can I tell you what I feel? And I'm not a theologian. I'll leave that to Reverend Lou. Okay. I feel it was his entry into Jerusalem. Let's think about this. By choosing to ride it on a donkey rather than a war horse that the Hebrews were expecting their Messiah, the Meshach, to come in as a warrior king. He rode in, and the massive crowds gathered for the Passover festival and treated him like royalty. Not on a war horse, which would be easy for the powers that be to attack, but he came in quietly on a donkey. And everybody spread their cloaks on the dusty road and waved palm branches to pave his way. And by allowing the crowds to hail him as king and the son of David, Jesus was making a public, undeniable claim that he was a long-awaited Messiah. Now you can imagine how that went over with Caiaphas and all of them. You can imagine now, understand a little bit why his political opposition led to his death. But, like John Lewis said, he created good trouble. Throughout history, we've had to fight the good fight. I'm gonna lay some names out, and I know listing names can be boring, but you gotta hear them. Harriet Tubman, Levi Coffin, Frederick Douglass from the Underground Railroad. In modern day, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, Thurgood Marshall, Ella Baker, Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was most known as the chief strategist and lead organizer of the 1963 March on Washington. And in my research, I also found out that he was also, in his time frame, a gay leader. We also have Fannie Lou Hamer, A. Philip Randolph, W.E.B. Du Bois, and, of course, John Lewis. If we look at LGBTQ activists, Harvey Milk, Alok Menon, Marsha P. Johnson, and Sylvia Rivera, central figures in the 1969 Stonewall riots. And they also co-founded STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, providing shelter for unhoused and marginalized trans youth. We have Billie Jean King, Frank Kameny, Rachel Levine, RuPaul, and J. Charles. I never knew his last name. Okay? Laverne Cox and Dr. Timothy Selig. We also look at the DNA of this church is in making good trouble. The Washington Square United Methodist Church was known as the Peace Church for its intense anti-war activism, supporting conscientious observers and serving as a sanctuary for those resisting the Vietnam War. The church gained notoriety when an AWAR pacifist surrendered there in 1968 under the leadership of Reverend Finley Sheff. Under Pastor Rabels, who served from 1973 through 1984, who was the first openly gay minister with a major American denominational congregation. The church solidified its reputation as a progressive, inclusive center for social justice. Founded in 1973, Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays was founded right here at Metropolitan Dwayne United Methodist Church. And if you look outside, there's a plaque that proclaims that. Members of the Church of the Village successfully challenged the General Conference, and not alone, part of our connectional ministry, but they challenged the General Conference of the United Methodist Church. And as of May 2026, the United Methodist Church has removed the language from its Book of Disciplines, stating that the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. I'm going to step away for a second and just say, if I'm a child of God, how can anything be incompatible? Previous bans on ordination of openly gay, openly LGBTQ clergy, and same-sex marriage ceremonies were also removed from the 2024 General Conference. And I also believe we have a member of this church who was arrested during an ICE protest. The Good Trouble from ACT UP, founded in 1987, who through protests achieved lasting victories in medical treatment, healthcare access, which allows, I want you to think about that. Well, it allows today's AIDS walk to be a fundraiser rather than a protest. And finally, getting in good trouble is necessary trouble in the fight against the scribes and Pharisees and the Sanhedrin. You know, that's the party in charge and the Supreme Court, respectively. It will not be easy. In some cases, it took generations, but we will get there together. Now, I want everybody to do something right now. Reach out and hold somebody's hand. And don't be shy. If you're new here, you're not new. You're adopted as soon as you walk into that door. Now, if you have ever received an email from me, you will see why we will get there together. My signature is a quote from the Reverend Dr. Althea Spencer Miller, one of our ministers in residence. And it says, "May you stretch forth your hand as an offering, and may there always be another hand to hold. Amen.